28 days prior to the release of 28 Years Later, I watched 28 Days Later for the first time. This movie has been hailed as one of the best zombie movies, a classic by everyone I've heard talk about it. And I think I might have just missed the window for this one because I watched it over 20 years later. It was a really good zombie movie, but I guess I went in with super high expectations because of everyone saying it's the best zombie movie or their favorite one. And I know technically it's feral people, not really zombies. I think zombies works as shorthand here anyway. Obviously, you get really good performances from Cillian Murphy, Brendan Gleeson, Naomi Harris, and Christopher Eccleston, which considering how low budget the movie is, that's like a sneakily good cast. I like the idea of feral people. I thought it was a neat thing that it was kind of confined to just England and the rest of the world was like good luck because that's probably what would actually happen. Some of the elements that I thought were really neat were sort of the tension that you had every time one of these raging people showed up because it does transfer super easily with bites, saliva, blood, obviously very similar to zombies, but they did a good job of making every single one feel like a massive threat. I thought it was a pretty cool opening, and I'm not sure if it was inspired by the Walking Dead graphic novel or if the Walking Dead graphic novel was inspired by it, or it's just a good way to start a zombie story. Personally, could have gone without seeing Cillian Murphy's cock. I'm sure my wife was happy. But the opening is pretty iconic, I would say. I had actually seen parts of that without knowing it before the movie, just because of how well done it is and how creepy it is. I thought it was a really great introduction to the monsters themselves when Jim starts running from them in the church, and then he meets up with Selena and Mark. And as soon as Mark gets bit, Selena just no hesitation cuts him down because of how fast people turn with this. And I had mixed feelings on the fast turning versus slow turning. I think for world building, fast turning zombies makes more sense because if it was slow turning, you'd think you'd be able to quarantine it off. But when you have the more slow conversion, it kind of does allow for more moral questions and ambiguity and emotional scenes and that sort of thing. I thought it did a pretty good job of you really feeling for every character without them getting much screen time, where pretty much as soon as you meet everyone, they've all either seen or accepted that their family is dead and everyone that they know is gone because the virus has just killed so many people or turned them, whichever. It does some of the classic things that I think are kind of a given now. I'm not sure if they were before this movie or not, where you hear some kind of signal or there's some kind of safe haven, and that's sort of the thread of hope that you're given for a way to get through this beyond just fighting for survival every day, which was obviously a very big theme of the movie. The theme obviously being that just because things are shitty doesn't mean life isn't worth living and people aren't worth caring about. And they do a pretty cool job of them having this nice little sort of family vacation type trip, a couple little stressful incidents, but overall pretty calm to get to this military base. And then when they get there, as is the case with most zombie things, there's more to it than just a safe place to be. I tend to not be a fan in general of having sort of the trope of your antagonist being rapers because it just feels like it's in everything. But I think the way it's done in this actually makes sense. And I think it's pretty believable as to what would happen. And they even have a pretty big conversation about it, which is interesting, where Christopher Eccleston or Major Henry West is like, you know, if we just have 9 men here, what are we doing? Like, we're all just literally sitting here waiting to die or get killed by these fucking monsters, and how important hope is in some kind of future. And I think there's a pretty interesting message there that's sort of reflected in innate biology and your instincts of why men care about women and want to protect women is also because of the aspect that women are necessary and the keys to the future. I mean, despite what some fucking idiots would say, a world of only men would die out in one generation. I thought Jim's arc was particularly well executed, of this guy who kind of doesn't want to kill anything. He's really scared. We see him kill a boy because he has to. And then eventually when the humans try to execute him, he upgrades to being willing to kill actual humans to protect Selena and Hannah. The logistics of how he escapes the execution, you could say are kind of questionable. They probably could have just shot both the guys and been done with it, but you know, not a huge thing that ruins the movie or anything. And then obviously I like the sort of parallel there where he almost turns into one of the raging people himself for that last part to fight. And they kind of cap it off with Hannah hitting him in the back of the head with a vase because she thought that he was biting Selena. Which you could argue if he had bitten her, it's already too late, but it's still a nice little comedic moment there. I don't think very many movies do the interrupted kiss thing very well, but that one I thought was pretty good. And then Selena sort of runs the opposite arc of Jim, where she has just kind of conceded that everything is fucked and survival is all that matters. And then along the trip, she also starts to value more than just living. So it's a nice little sort of opposite but parallel arc that they go on there. Jim kind of going from the positive one to borderline becoming a monster. And obviously Selena starting out as one and, becoming more human. So all that stuff is really well done. It was really interesting to see Brendan Gleeson as like a good dad instead of some guy raping the Joker. Or just a dick in general like Mad Eye Moody. Although I thought his death was lame as shit. I'm sure there's people who like his death where he gets a drop of blood in his eye and turns. I was just like, I get what they're going for and the whole idea that the blood is potent everywhere and how dangerous it is. I actually thought they were going to do something with maybe one of the rats or like an animal. For a second, when Hannah got bit under the car, I was like, oh shit, are the rats going to be infected? And now she's going to turn. Because that'd be pretty dark to do, but obviously it didn't go that way. So overall, there's a lot of things it does really well. And I can definitely see why it was so beloved at the time, even if I don't have a raging hard-on for it like everyone else. Some of the issues that I had with it are mainly the world-building things and also that fucking filter to make the camera look grainy the whole time got on my nerves. But the world-building to me was pretty questionable. Like I said, the idea of the rest of the world being like, you're on your own, I totally get. And that part I like because I feel like most movies don't have the balls to commit to that, especially considering that the disease is on an island and it's not airborne, so it's already contained. I mean, I guess you could have the concern of if people get blood in the river and then that goes out to the ocean and blah, 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 but that seems like a really unnecessary concern to have given the way that it works. But the biggest issues I have, and I don't know if this is just a budget thing, are how empty everything is and how sort of serene and peaceful it all is. I wasn't really buying that because a disease like this would have to spread so fast. And you see people's dinners on the table and all that sort of thing as they go from place to place. And then you just have these empty ass highways and roads. It just doesn't really make much sense to me. I thought Walking Dead actually did get that right, where you have one side of the highway that's fucked because everyone is trying to leave, and the other side is empty because no one's going in. And I also felt like they had a little bit too much freedom to move during the daytime because of how empty everything was. They're just kind of walking around, and if they're quiet, broadly speaking, they're kind of safe. Like even the incident that Jim has to start the movie, he has to walk all the way into the church and like yell out for people before they start coming to him. And then the other part that I kind of just don't get for the world building is usually when you have a zombie thing, part of the reason that it spreads or is able to is because one, they refuse to bomb the cities, which seems to be very clearly the case with this one, obviously, especially with the good condition that everything was in. But an element of it is that in order to kill a zombie, you have to shoot its head or its brainstem or whatever. And that is kind of what balances out for the fact that we have machine guns or guns in general, is that it has to be a headshot. So even if you blow off its legs, it still crawls toward you. And they also don't sleep. Like in this movie, the Ragers kind of seem to just chill unless they're pursuing. And the zombies are just always moving and wandering. And because you haven't turned them into zombies, they're just kind of feral people that can be killed with one gunshot to the heart or chest or whatever. I also just sort of don't believe that it would ever spread beyond the first area. Like as soon as the military was mobilized, you're essentially creating a kill box where they're just mowing down humans. And like, yeah, they're bloody and pissed off humans and whatever, but they're not going to move 24/7. They're not going to keep moving all shot up. They're just dead. And I know England is not America where we have more guns than people, but even still, like their military has weapons. I'm sure some people have weapons. We see them fight back with swords and machetes and shit. I don't know. I just am not super convinced that the virus could spread the way that it's shown to in the movie. And the last thing I'll say is it might not even be a knock on this movie specifically. We might just be in such a technological era that I don't know if zombie stories are that functional anymore. And they might need to start being placed in like the revolutionary times where people just had muskets and shit and sabers, or if you're in Japan, they had samurai swords, whatever. And the last thing that I kind of took issue with was the editing. And again, I know it's kind of a stylistic thing to make it feel intense and chaotic and whatever, but it was really hard for me to follow what was happening in some of the action scenes because it's just cutting from like face to face and like place to place really fast. It makes it really hard to keep track of what's going on. But overall, Good movie. I'm looking forward to 28 years later. I just watched 28 Weeks Later. Probably won't do a video about that one. That one is just kind of generic, action-packed hour and a half. It really flew by. Definitely has its own issues, especially with the initial outbreak of the virus in that one, that their one immune person doesn't have any fucking guards around them. But either way, looking forward to the movie. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you think. I try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.